I have this document, which I'm going to kind of run on to talk about website optimization. All right, and I will close this out. So, why optimize your website? I mean, if you can put a big image in it and it looks good, and you've got a rich media in it, what's the problem with that if it takes a little while? Well, the problem is, to answer my own question, that if people have to wait for the website to load, they're less likely to consume wherever it is that your message is. And so if you're trying to sell things, for example, you're going to see a sharp fall off if you don't have an optimized website. Or to kind of reverse that, you will have an increase in your sales or email newsletter signups or whatever it is if your site runs faster. So a fast website is an important thing to do to keep your site running well and to keep your visitors on there. Okay, so there kind of there's the conversion. Another important piece of that is that you will see a decrease in your server costs if you have a faster website. So it takes up less bandwidth to deliver the content. It takes up less server disk space. It just costs less. And if you've got a big website, then it costs a lot less. You know, it can make a big difference in terms of the bottom line of managing the platform. And there are statistics out there that if you are looking for a reason to convince someone that they need to optimize their website, you can go to this link here, and this is on the Moodle, so you can take a look at this and kind of get an idea of how much it costs for someone to download your website, which is another reason, right? So you've got the cost of conversion, the cost of managing the website, and then the cost to the consumer to consume that. Now, in the United States, we don't really think about the cost I personally don't think about the cost because I have an unlimited data plan. And so when it doesn't cost me anything other than my $70 a month that I pay for my thing. But a lot of people, it costs them money, you know, in their data, they have 200 megabytes of data or 200 gigabytes of data or whatever the amount is that they have, and they pay for that. And so what this website does is kind of look at costs, the cost of the internet around the world. And so that's one of the reasons why you might want to optimize your website. So that's this thing. Oh, here, we didn't look at this page. So this page has statistics for arguing for keeping your website optimized in terms of the network optimization. So if you're like trying to collate a sales document, or you're trying to convince your boss to engage in this kind of work, this is a resource for statistics that kind of defend the need for that kind of thing, right? For updating your website. So I'm gonna move on from that. So where do you start with this? So one way to start is to create a data budget, right? And you can say that your entire web folder can't be more than a megabyte. Or you could also like itemize the things that are in your website, your images, your fonts, all of your other stuff, and then try to like lower and reduce the amount of space that those things take. One really important tool to know about is the Google Page Speed Insights. And what this tool does, this is a Google product. You can put in a URL. Here I did A/B Tech. It gives you a score, which is relevant, but it's not, it's like that doesn't really give you much actionable information. But the information below that is actionable, and it will tell you the types of things that you can do to save your data transfer time. And it does also, it did at one point actually give you the assets. It like get your assets. So here you've got the desktop view, and then there's the mobile view, and you can take a look at that, and it gives you information about that stuff. So another tool that you can use for that is the inspector. And so if I go to, oops, I'm going to do that in Chrome. Oh my goodness. All right, so if I open up a Chrome window, I think that Firefox also has a tool like this, but I'm more familiar with Chrome's tool. So if I go to AB Tech's website and I want to kind of figure out what's going on here, I can go over to the inspector and open up that tool. Drop that down a little bit. And so this is kind of the meat and potatoes of the inspector, right? I can like take this element, hover over a thing, click on it. It gets me to the place in the HTML. I can see all of the CSS, and then I can manage that CSS and play around with stuff to change to change it. It doesn't change it on the server, of course, but if I want to deconstruct how someone did something, this inspector is really helpful for that. Or if I'm working on my own project and I'm trying to figure out how to make the thing work, this inspector is important. But it's also good for the network speed, and I can see all of the assets that are being downloaded for this page. I can also see all of the sources. So this is where all the stuff is coming from. So the sources and network. Performance is another thing that I can do. I can record and then refresh, and then it will give me information about the stuff that happens. Okay, and so I stop that, and then it gives me a report that I can use. And that might take a little bit longer than we're willing to wait for stuff. But here's an example of the kind of information that you can gain from the inspector. Okay. And then it gives you some other information. So the sources, network, and performance, these tools will give you information about your thing. Okay. So, so that's important stuff. Google has all kinds of tools to help you and curriculum materials to help you learn about this. And so I'd encourage you to learn as much as you can. And it doesn't just happen, people. You've got to make it happen. And by making it happen, what I'm encouraging you to do is to take 10 minutes, 20 minutes a week, separated in half. You take 10 minutes on a Tuesday and 10 minutes on a Thursday, and you read a blog article, or you go to one of these Google courses, or you do something where you're kind of like advancing your knowledge in the field. Okay, so we just looked at the browser tools. So you've got the dev tools in. There's also there's a plugin for Chrome that has other tools where you can disable JavaScript or disable the CSS, disable all styles. This is a really important thing to do as well, because if your page doesn't make sense, now this isn't beautiful, but it makes sense. I can read through this, and here's a title, and here's the other stuff. This has good hierarchy. And that's really, really important, because search engines look at this, screen readers look at this, and this is just something that you want to be, on top of. Can you do that? And this dev tools is a resource for doing this kind of thing. All right, so be aware that there are tools. There is also a Firefox web developer browser. I would encourage you to take a look at that. It's a little bit different than the other browser. So here's, I think there's a link to that as well. So the low-hanging fruit for network optimization are your images. How can you make your images smaller? You can reduce the quality of those images, and of course use the correct format. And consider using a modern format like WebP would be another way to do it, as opposed to a PNG. There are services that you can go to that will compress your images for you. This is a really, really good one, Tiny PNG. There is a Tiny PNG plugin for WordPress that will compress your images, all of your images on your WordPress installation. So I encourage you to take a look at Tiny PNG and throw some images in there and see how much of a difference you can make. Talking about images, be sure that you don't put an empty image into your code. Anytime the browser has to process something, that takes up time. That slows down your website. So be aware that this is one example of something that you need to be aware of in terms of like code either repeating itself, overwriting CSS, image source tags that are empty, image source tags that are broken. You know, this just the list goes on and on. Be careful what you're serving and what your code looks like. So the next another item that will help you to optimize your pages are to optimize your typography. You can use Google Fonts. All of those fonts are open source, or you can use them for commercial projects, and they're all optimized for the web. So the last thing you want to do is put your desktop font Helvetica into your web folder and have that be the font that you use. Not only are desktop fonts not designed for the web, and they're a lot bigger, but also most people have Helvetica. And so if you're going to use Helvetica for an example, then consider using a web-safe font, or consider using web-safe fonts for everything. Maybe you would have one font that's a title font, but then you can see with this, you know, Arial Black. 98% of the people who have Windows and 96% of people who have Mac have Arial Black. And maybe that font is just the right font for the thing that you need to convey, right? Does it really matter that you've got another font that is similar in size? So consider using a web-safe font. Optimize your CSS. So consider not having any inline styles. Have one style sheet that's cached in the browser that goes from you know, page to page. You might consider splitting up your CSS if you've got like a big style sheet to have an inline or an embedded CSS at the top of your page for the stuff that is going to be served first, the above the fold stuff. And then that way that will quickly be read, and then it will read the other thing. Minify JavaScript and CSS. In my experience is that if the minified HTML slows things down, and so, you know, you may want to consider before you do that. Minimization of code is just simply a matter of taking your code. So we can come back to our earlier example. Let's see if it's still loaded here. And so if I wanted to minimize some CSS, I would, here's my thing, here's my style. I'm just going to take it from the beginning of the thing and just right before the style, copy that, paste it into here and compress. And then here, this is minimized code, right? All of the comments, all of the spacing gets pulled out. It's not human readable, or it is, but it's, you know, it's not as easy to read, but it's faster because it's a smaller file size, and the browser can read it just as easily. Okay, so that's minimization. And then on the server side, there are other tools that you can have your server administrator. So if you've got a Bluehost or a SiteGround or some other kind of web hosting, you can see if they've got gzip or HTTP2 installed. And by having those technologies, that can speed up your website as well. Here's some links to kind of take a look at that. And then, you know, to wrap up this little kind of brief talk on web optimization, it's important to monitor your progress. And so possibly monitoring your progress is to take a snapshot in the Google Analytics, not Google Analytics, but the web page speed insights. So I might take note, even copy this page or print a screenshot or whatever, and have before and after And especially if you're doing this work for another company, you know, take your before and after shots so you can prove that you have added value to your company or to your client. Okay. All right. How are we doing on time? 11:15. We're right at it. I'm going to take a very quick moment to take a look at these assignments, and then I will let you go. I'm sorry to go just slightly over.